Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and today you'll learn a simple 5-step process that helps ensure your sales stories, pitches, and presentations all land right the first time. But no matter what storytelling process you follow, they all start by clarifying your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life. And that starts with the ABT Agile Narrative Framework. Use it just like these folks.
Samantha Scholl here, Entrepreneur Program Manager for the Better Business Bureau. And Park, I am just reaching out today to say thank you. Thank you so much for your thought leadership. Your Business of Story training, with the emphasis of the ABTs of storytelling, has helped 160 businesses. Yes, can you believe we've graduated 160 businesses so far? And it is thanks to you that those businesses now feel confident telling their story. They understand how to use their story to increase revenue, make that impact that they really, truly need.
When I found the ABT and how simple it was and how applicable it was, it completely changed the game for me. And I've been able to implement story now into social media posts, texts, emails, conversation, and it's just greatly increased my ability to communicate and persuade for the things that I really, really care about.
It is probably the most powerful communications tool in my toolbox. You know, the A, setting the scene, the B, the tension, the T, the resolution. It sets me up for success every single time.
I think the ABT is the most brilliant, simple framework that creates an amazing impact. And what I found is that those CEOs that can tell stories are the ones who grow revenues faster and have more compelling companies.
I found the ABT method, also known as the N but therefore method, through Park Howell and the Business of Story. So now my communications are clear, they're concise, and memorable.
I can tell you with certainty the ABT process that you taught me is by far the most effective and the fastest way to get to message clarity.
This model, so simple but so powerful at the same time. The and, but, and therefore, just unbelievable how everything changes when you use it.
And that's why the and, but, and therefore model is pure genius. It allows you to relate to people, then it gives them the but, which tees up the problem, and then the therefore, which points the way to the different future, aka solution. And so it's pure genius.
So if you're frustrated trying to find the clarity in your brand story, the focus in your sales presentations, and the compelling singular narrative in all of your messaging, well, clear up your confusion with our quick online course, the ABTs of Agile Communications, at businessofstory.com/ABT. You'll learn this proven narrative framework where all persuasive and influential leadership, sales, and marketing storytelling starts. Think of it as high-performance communication using just these 3 simple words: and, but, therefore. But it's trickier than it sounds. So start your ABT training session today at businessofstory.com/ABT. When you complete the 3 20-minute modules, email me your ABT and I'll provide you with added value coaching to get you dialed in right from the start. So clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life at businessofstory.com/ABT. Today's guest, Melissa Kwan, is on a mission to help you get your freedom back. And she offers 2 ways to simplify your business for even greater growth. And she has a rather firm stance on why you should be doing just that.
There are so many ways to get to the same place. And the thing that actually really bothers me about reading a lot of this content and what's out there and like motivational content, and a lot of this is on LinkedIn as well, is when people post things like, if your startup is growing at 5%, you're good. If it's growing at, and I'm making up these numbers, if it's growing up at 10%, it's great. If it's growing at 20%, you're hitting it out of the ballpark. It's like, you know what? who are you to tell me where my category is based on my growth rate? Because growth depends on so many things. What if I don't want to make work my entire life? And that's kind of what I'm on a mission to want to be a thought leader of, is you don't have to work in your business all the time. Working more does not mean you're going to be more successful or more productive. In fact, you should work less.
Melissa is the co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, an automated webinar solution that combines pre-recorded video with real-time interactions and live chat to deliver an engaging experience for your attendees. eWebinar is the byproduct of Melissa living in what she called webinar hell for 5 years in her previous startup. By automating her storytelling, over 2,000 people have joined the eWebinar demo on their own time in the last 10 months, a 25% conversion rate. Signed up for a free trial, and it was all on their own without talking to a soul, and really freed up Melissa's time. She believes that the power of storytelling can be scaled once you nail that pitch. On today's show, you'll learn Melissa's proven 5-step process to make sure that what you're saying is actually being heard. This is the same process she has used with her earlier startup and now launching and growing eWebinar. Hold on to your seats, because we're about to explore how you can automate those annoying, repetitive, and tedious tasks, like giving that same sales demo over and over again, onboarding your people with the same information, or giving that training that you do in your sleep. Frees you up using eWebinar and her approach so that you can focus your time on what you value more. Plus, you'll want to hear her story as a 3-year digital nomad that, out of sheer frustration, led to the creation of eWebinar to help her and now you scale your sales stories. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Melissa Kwan. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Park.
Now, where are you coming to us from?
I am currently in Vietnam, in a fishing village called Mui Ne.
And what are you doing there?
So in 2019, at the end of 2019, we came to Ho Chi Minh to meet with some development shops, because I was kind of in the middle of starting eWebinar, my current business. And we always loved Vietnam and decided that we wanted to come here and meet some development shops and eventually hire one. And that's how we ended up hiring our first team. But then, 2020 happened, and we were not able to get into the country since then. So we have, over time, like 5 people that work on our team, but we've never actually met them in person. So this is the trip that we took to meet them for the first time. And we're just kind of taking a weekend into this little village that's 4 hours outside of Ho Chi Minh, just to spend the weekend.
All right. Can you paint the picture for our listeners of what that little village looks and feels like?
Wow. It is so hard, but let me try. Okay. So it's got like one main road where it's where the locals go for vacation. So it's not like, your Four Seasons, Fairmont, like big name hotels. It's like it's where the locals go, because they don't make a ton of money. So they might come here like, once a year. And it's interesting because you pass by these little coves and the boats are round, like they're bowls. They look like bowls. They're not like little boats. So I actually read up on that today. I typed in like, why are Mui Ne boats round? And so back then, I guess, so this was a French colony some years ago, and Vietnam was a French colony. And I guess at some point, the French people like levied a tax on boats. And so, as, entrepreneurs would go, this is a very, very entrepreneurial country. They started weaving baskets that are round to serve also as boats, like these life-size baskets.
Huh. How big were they? I mean, like 10 feet in circumference?
Yeah, they would be like 8 feet. Like they're sizable. So they could fit like 4 people, like maybe like a big fishing net. And it just became like basket boats became a thing for this region because the French levied a tax and then they tried to get around it. And then they made huge baskets that they passed off as boats. So yeah, it's just a very, very local, humble, down to earth, like part of the country. And we're here in like super low season. So there's like nobody on the street. And it is just so amazing because Vietnam is one of the most entrepreneurial countries that I have ever been to.
What? How so?
Like if it's raining, someone's selling you an umbrella. If you're sitting down in a restaurant and it's all outside because it's hot, like a kid's selling you a packet of tissue. If it's hot, like in the middle of the intersection, someone's selling you like soft drinks or like water. We were just walking down the road that's outside our hotel, and it's one super long strip with very little people on it. One side's the ocean, the other side is just like lined up with local restaurants. And this guy comes up, he honks at us in a moped, and he's asking us if we want to rent a moped. And originally we thought like he's asking us if we want to ride. So we're like, no. And then we realized, oh, he's asking us if we wanted to rent this moped. And actually we did want to rent the moped because we were going to go out and find a place to rent something. And he literally just gave us the moped under him. And he was like, yeah, it's $5 a day and he'll pick it up at our hotel in 3 days. Like that's this country.
That's just-in-time entrepreneurialism, isn't it? What am I selling this morning?
Has anything you want right now, right here.
That is awesome. Now, when I was preparing for this interview, I went to your LinkedIn profile and was reading through some of your articles and so forth, and you did this thing for 3 years, digital nomading.
I did.
Can you tell us just a little bit about that? What is it, number one? What were you doing before it? And why did you decide to take a time out and travel the world for 3 years?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I grew up in Canada.
Vancouver?
Calgary, but then I did go to Vancouver for UBC. So I went to college in UBC, which is in Vancouver. So home is Canada, but I've been an international kid pretty much all my life. My previous 2 startups were in real estate technology. So when I was trying to grow that company, I was traveling from, Vancouver to New York, like for kind of like months at a time. And eventually I just decided to move to New York, but I didn't have any friends or anything there. So I had an opportunity, I think this was like back in, like, I want to say like 2017 or 2018. I had an opportunity to join a project, which was a co-living house in New York. So it was 5 entrepreneurs came together to rent a massive space instead of having tiny spaces of our own, so we could live and work out of there. And at that time, it was like co-living was not even a thing. Like WeWork was just starting, right? Like the idea of like adults living together was not popularized. I mean, now it is, but back then we were like, oh, let's do this thing where we live and work together. So the 5 of us actually rented what we call Gramercy House. It was, by the way, featured in the New York Times back then as the Millennial Commune.
What year are you talking here,
I think it was, I want to say it was like 2017, or 2018, like somewhere around there. So it was not too long ago. So imagine this. It's a 3,000 square foot, 2-level brownstone, traditional brownstone, 4-bedroom in the middle of Manhattan. So it was like, if for anyone that's listening that knows New York, it's like 4 blocks from Union Square. It is like prime location. Nobody could afford it. All of us were paying like 90% of our whatever salary we had towards this house. Like the rent for that house was $12,000 like per month, $12,000 per month. And we were all like scrappy founders. And I am definitely getting somewhere with this. So eventually I was building my company there, and I was never profitable until I got to New York. We built a business. And as I was getting close to profitability, I was like, well, why am I paying so much for this house and also going out of town? Like I was doing a lot of traveling for my company. Like I was doing lots of conferences and things like that. But I had also met my life partner at that time through the house. He was our first Airbnb guest. So I'm like, okay, not only are we spending $4,000 a month on one room that we share, we're also constantly traveling. why don't we just not rent the house and just travel full time? Because I'm like, okay, well, if we're spending $4,000 a month on this thing, like where else could you go? So then you go on Airbnb and you look up like Argentina, you look up Chile, right? You look up Mexico, and you're like, I can actually rent something for a month and have change. So I think about like 4 years ago, we left New York to travel full time, but it wasn't like vacation, right? It was like, I always had a remote team. So it was easy for me to just go somewhere else. As long as you're willing to deal with the time zones, you can actually work anywhere. And we ended up just being on the road with a hand carry because we don't want to check luggage for 3 years. And it really was the richest experience of our lives. And eventually we found Amsterdam. That's where my quote unquote home is, but we still travel quite a bit.
And we got to spend 5 summers in Amsterdam. I was working for Arizona State University as an adjunct professor of practice, teaching storytelling in their School of Sustainability, and taught a master's program in that. And every year we would go to Amsterdam every June for 1 week, and our international students would all come in and we would descend on Amsterdam. And it was so much fun. It was such a beautiful place to live, well, for a short amount of time there. And the people were just fantastic. Just one of my favorite places in the world. In all of your travels, is what's one of your favorite or maybe surprisingly favorite places?
So I want to actually add one more thing that I forgot. The one thing I forgot was I had spent so many years building this company, my previous company, and I had suffered so many years that when I finally got to profitability, I had some mind share to think about, like, what can I do for me? Because for 8 years, I was doing all of this for someone else, right? I had to make sure all the bills were paid 15th and 30th every single month, twice a month. And those were my worst days.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and so finally, when I could do something for me, I was like, you know what? Like, I never traveled as a kid. I always wanted to travel. And, you know, if this thing is going to be hard anyway, I want to be able to do it on my terms. And what's going to make me happy? So actually, nomading and traveling was something that was the one thing I did for me. And then, you know, it kind of took a life of its own. We discovered a lot of different things. But I would say like the most surprising place was Santiago, Chile. It was actually the first spot that we went. That's the thing about traveling, is it just totally opens up your mind to things that like you were previously maybe very prejudiced about, right? So before I went to Chile, I'm like, oh, do I even want to go there? Like, is it third world? Like the moment we landed, we only went there because our friend was there. The moment we landed, like when we went to Santiago, we realized the entire city was designed for nomading. Like they had all these like co-working spaces, internet speed was fast. They even had groups that would come in, like different groups that would come in 30 days at a time in the co-working space that we worked out of, because they had made these arrangements. And apparently there were companies that made a living out of taking people to nomad 1 month at a time in different countries. So they were like really set up for that. So I think that was one of the most surprising places. And then of course we like rented a car, drove around wine country, like just also like we worked, but also kind of had the time of our lives kind of thing.
Is this where your mission came from, to help people get their freedom back, no matter, you know, whatever work or startup that you were bootstrapping? Is it all about helping people get their freedom back? And was this what triggered it?
Yes. I mean, that's the super short answer. So in my previous company, I mean, a lot of people can relate to this, right? Like whether you're in tech or not, it doesn't matter. But like everybody knows what a webinar is, or like a live meeting, a live stream, right? Like it is the only way to get in front of all your customers without hopping on a plane. And right now, any demos you're doing, sales pitches, any training, onboarding, you're doing it on Zoom. Like even if your customers are local, they're not going to make time to see you. You're not going to go to their office and do a demo. Like you're going to do it on Zoom. So imagine I was nomading. All my customers were in Canada and the US. So I was living on Zoom in opposite hours, delivering like demos, onboarding trainings, like every single day, sometimes the exact same one.
It's a little bit like right now. You're in Vietnam, and it's 10:30 at night there, and here I am in northern Arizona, and it's 9:30 in the morning. So that same sort of thing.
Yeah. So there were some days that I would do 7 or 8 back-to-back trainings that were exactly the same for different companies. So back then I'm like, why? Like, it doesn't even make sense for me to hire a person to do it, let alone have a founder of a company do the exact same thing every day. And the thing is, when you do that, you don't have mind share to do anything else in your business. You're just exhausted at the end of it. Like, it's also not fun work, but it's important work, especially as a bootstrap company, right? Like, you need every bit of revenue. You need customers to be happy. So it's not to say it's not important. It is important, because if you don't train them, they don't stay. So it was so ridiculous that it got to the point where, like, this was such a big part of my life that any new city I went to, I would test the internet at the hotel or at the Airbnb right away. And if it wasn't fast enough for a live stream, I would have to go and find a SIM card and like tether off my phone. So like, I was just designed what didn't make sense to me was I worked so hard to earn this freedom to travel. And I was supposed to be living the time of my life. But what didn't make sense to me was I was completely tied down by my customers' training schedules. So how does that work? Right? Like, so I've earned this privilege, but then now I'm tied to you. So I've always kind of envisioned this incredible product that would just do my job for me while I would go have fun. And I just thought about this every single day, because doing this was infringing on me living my life. And I knew that there were more people like me out there. And the funny thing is, people say to me, you started a webinar company because you love webinars. I didn't start a webinar company because I like webinars. I started a company because I loathe them. I never want to do them again. And I want to make sure that people out there never have to do them again if they don't want to.
I love that, because it underscores something that I preach all the time in your storytelling, and that is your stories are not about what you make. In this case, you make webinars. It's about what you make happen. You loathed doing live webinars. That was the villain in this. Yeah. So what do you make happen is you give people back their freedom by enabling them to record their webinars and do these repetitive demos over and over and over again, and they don't have to think about it. But wasn't there other webinar software already out there that you could have used? And I can't think of the name of the one right now, but there's one where you produce a webinar and then you schedule it and you let it play.
There were other ones out there, and I certainly tried all of them, but they were all missing something. There were products out there, but they were not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it was almost like a GeoCities website. You guys remember that? Like GeoCities website versus what a Squarespace is now.
Yeah.
Right? What a Wix is now. Like, yeah, there were things that are out there, but they're not designed and built to the level that I wanted it to be. There were a lot of products that were built by marketers. They were not built by engineers and founders, right? Like tech founders.
What were they missing?
I mean, design is one, right? They were missing a chat system, like an asynchronous chat system. So like I could play a webinar, but it just didn't look very good. It didn't look very modern, but there was no chat. So then it's just a video. Like a webinar, what defines a webinar is someone can come in and engage with you, ask you a question, they can answer a poll, they can have some resources. Like, that's the reason why people like webinars and not YouTube videos, especially for training and onboarding and demos. They want to be there and they want to ask you a question and they want a response. And all these solutions, they had like an email box. And so when people so I did try them. So when people ask me a question, it would go to their email. So when I respond, it would go to their email, but they're in front of their computer. So there was just a disconnect. The communication was disconnected. So I thought what was missing in all these solutions that were already out there was just a proper chat system, kind of like any chat system that you see on a website right now. You go to any website right now, a little bubble will pop up and say, "Hey, Park, can I help you?" If you don't get a response right away, you trust and you know that you'll get a response by email. We didn't invent anything new. We just took a communication channel that works, that people enjoy, and we put it into our software. And that was kind of the biggest piece that was missing. But also, like, I think nowadays, like, everybody says, oh, it's easy to start a company or the barrier to entry is low. Actually, I don't think it's low at all. I think the barrier to entry in business is extremely high because consumer expectations have never been higher. Like how many seconds or minutes do I give a new app or a new piece of software before I ditch it? Mm-hmm. Or I go and I'm like, why doesn't it do all these things that I expect it to do? Where are all the integrations? What about my CRM? I don't want to use your CRM. What about mine? I don't want to go through Zapier. So it's the consumer expectations that have created this moat that is so high that, like, you know, people say like not all software is built the same. It's more true now than ever before. So I think a lot of times when people are like, well, how's yours better than the other? Well, it's easy for me to say, well, it's intentionally designed. It's, you know, it looks better, it feels better, but it's just something that has to be experienced.
How's that chat work? If you were running a remote demo and you're asleep in Vietnam at 3 a.m. and they're watching it in New York at whatever time at noon, and they start asking questions, how does that interplay work?
Yeah, so if I don't respond in 2 minutes, there'll be an autoresponder that pops up that says, "Hey Park, I got your message. I can't respond right away, but you will hear back from me through email." And then they'll just keep typing, just like any support chat system.
Okay.
That we're already kind of familiar with that. And then when I get up, I see like, okay, I have 5 threads that I haven't responded to. The attendee's already offline. I'll respond, and then they'll get my email with the entire history of, you know, whatever they typed in on email.
So are people using eWebinar just for demos, or what are some of the other use cases?
Yeah, so definitely demos and sales pitches, but our biggest use case is actually post-sale. So like all the onboarding, customer education, new feature releases, product education, training. So anything that you might have a trainer on it like all the time. So companies might be doing this like once a month or once a week, but imagine with eWebinar, if you never have to have a live host, not only are you replacing the one webinar that you're doing, it opens up a whole new world of content that you can create now that no one has to be there to actually run it. And the thing is, the people that do the best presentations are your executives. They're the people that have been around the longest. They're the founders, right? It's not like, however, anyone on your team can support a webinar. Like anyone can answer a question. So now, like, to give you an idea of impact, like before us, we have a company, later.com, that would do like 2 to 4 webinars a month, like for customers at maximum, because the people that are running them are also doing other things. They're not like webinar hosts. And now with us, they're doing like, I think something like 40 different webinars every single month. And they are spending about an hour a day just responding to people. And like anyone can hop in and respond. So imagine instead of 4 sessions, you're running 400. Like that's the kind of impact that you can have on your business.
So Melissa, you and I were introduced via email by Gavin Hammer, a good friend over at StoryPrompt, who bootstrapped and built Sendable. Sendable is this amazing social media platform, storytelling platform that we've been using in Business of Story for the last 5 or 6 years. And he and his wife, Martine, built it. They spun it in, February 2021, and now they're creating StoryPrompt. So he knows certainly about storytelling and bootstrapping startups. Well, that's what you're doing too. Did you have to get any VC funding or investor funding to get eWebinar going? And how did you use storytelling to get people to really understand and embrace your vision and your mission, which ultimately comes down to helping people get their freedom back?
We don't have any VC funding. We're also a bootstrap company. So myself, my co-founder, who is also my life partner, kind of like Martine to Gavin.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, apparently if it works, it works really well. And so, so David and I both put in some capital. We do have some friends and family funding as well, just to get it off the ground. And then right now we're mostly funded by revenue. We're not profitable yet, but we're getting super close. I think it's interesting, right? Because I think the media skews our idea of success so much, especially for tech companies and tech founders, that we think, or it makes us think that if you get VC funding, then you have permission to succeed. Or now you're on to something. Or if you have it, then you're successful. In my past 12 years of running tech startups, I don't know a single founder that is close to me that said, I can't wait to get VC funding again. Like most people come out of that will say, the next time I do it, I'm going to do it on my own terms. So when I was living in New York, I also kind of fell into that trap of thinking, well, I really want that. I want that stamp of approval. And I did kind of I did try that a little bit. I didn't get funded in my previous company. That's actually kind of why we had to bootstrap it. But I also realized that because freedom, which is kind of the theme here, freedom is my number one priority. I can't really imagine working this hard for your business every single day and then have someone tell you what you can and cannot do and when you can and cannot sell your company and how much you should sell it for, right? I just can't you can't have a remote team or you can't be in Vietnam or you have to have an office in San Francisco. I can't even imagine that. So that was coming into this, not only did I not want VC funding, I always had an idea that I wanted to build a company with friends. So all of our friends and family investors are people that we spend holidays with, that we've, been to Burning Man with, people that I would have over for the holidays. These are super close friends of ours. And actually to start, that's the first story I told them is, wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could build something together? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could structure this company so that all the investors will get paid back through dividends long before the company sells? Because the idea of your investor not being able to get paid back until the company sells in 10 or 15 years, that's crazy to me, right? So actually, the way that I structured this company is there's a dividend structure where if there's dividends that get paid out, your portion of dividends is proportionate to your amount of investment. So you can own 1% of the company, but have 7% of dividends, for example.
Do you follow Greg Head at all? He's a good friend of mine. He's on LinkedIn. He's worked with startups.
Yeah, I do.
You know Greg over at Scaling Point because he is on a mission now too to say, hey, VC funding has its place, but for you bootstrap startups, founders, there's a whole other avenue. And I think you are really illustrating that you don't need that VC funding. You can really have a tremendous impact doing it your own way.
Yeah, I'm an avid listener of the Practical Founders podcast. I'm a fan of Greg as well, love his content, but it takes so much to awareness and courage, because there's so much social pressure, especially as a founder, if you're in these communities, to come out and say, you know what, I don't want what you want, or I don't want what everyone else wants. I'm just going to do it my way. And Gavin is exactly the same way. Yeah. And how amazing is it that you get to call all of your own shots? But that's also the story that I was telling my initial investors is, I may never raise another round again. And what does that mean for you? That means it's not a pump and dump startup. This is truly something that I want to build as a high revenue, low head count. I don't want a lot of people. I want amazing people, but small team. And I want to grow this so that everyone can have a great life. I want to grow this so that we can all have passive income and we can all go and do whatever we want to do. Because the people that are investors of our company, they're not entrepreneurs and founders of their own, but they're well-to-do. They're very, very successful people. But they also realize, actually, if you really want to retire, you need a lot of money or you need a passive income. Something that at least just pays the bills, right? Just the basic things, so that whatever you have saved up, you can use. And people are starting to think about that, right, in their late 30s and 40s. And these are my age group. So that was the first story I told them is let's build this thing. And the thing is, if we can be successful, I have a dream that we could have investor retreats and on the company account, and all my friends will be there.
In Amsterdam and Santiago, Chile, and Vietnam.
Yeah, anywhere.
What kind of pushback did you get ever? Or I imagine, as a founder, you're always going to hear anti-stories of, Melissa, we can't possibly do that. Melissa, that sounds good. I don't see it working. What were the kind of anti-stories you had to overcome, and what stories did you use to overcome them?
I think I'm so numb already to you can't do this. It can't be done, and I've learned long ago, like 10 years ago, and someone had told me this and I never forgot it, is when someone tells you it can't be done, what they're really saying is they've never seen it done before. And that was actually my LinkedIn post, I think yesterday, is you can ask 10 people for advice and they will give you 10 different perspectives, because it doesn't matter how smart they are. They can only tell you advice from their own experience. And then they're going to move on and do their own thing. But then you're the one that's living and breathing and dreaming this. So I actually never let anything bother me. I don't let that get to me. I have a lot of conviction in what I do, because I also realize there are very few things in life that you cannot recover from. So what if I make the wrong decision this time? Or so what, and so what if I need to do it again and again and again? I'm doing that all the time anyway. There are so many ways to get to the same place. And the thing that actually really bothers me about reading a lot of this content and what's out there, and motivational content, and a lot of this is on LinkedIn as well, is when people post things like, if your startup is growing at 5%, you're good. If it's growing at, and I'm making up these numbers, if it's growing up at 10%, it's great. If it's growing at 20%, you're hitting it out of the ballpark. It's you know what? Who are you to tell me where my category is based on my growth rate? Because growth depends on so many things. What if I don't want to make work my entire life? And that's kind of what I'm on a mission to want to be a thought leader of, is you don't have to work in your business all the time. Working more does not mean you're going to be more successful or more productive. In fact, you should work less. That's why we created this product. I hate it when people are like, oh yeah, we can use eWebinar because we can do more work things. I'm like, no, we created eWebinar so you can spend more time doing literally anything else. You should go and have more fun with family. You should go and enjoy your life, because you know what? This is the only life you have. So let's free up all that time and you can go do some other stuff. So, coming back to that point, I don't really let people bother me when they say oh yeah, you can't, you can't see this stuff. You can't do this, or I can't imagine you doing this. But customers are different, right? So I'm always trying to convince our customers to, because we need the revenue to buy into what we're doing. And I actually, if I need to sell something, I have a very succinct, tried and tested structure of how I tell every single story, and it never fails me.
What is it?
If I have to do a sales pitch, if I have to do a presentation, if I have to teach someone how to do a sales pitch, there are only 5 things that you have to do to make sure you get someone to a close. Number 1 is you set the agenda. So say I have half an hour with someone to convince them to buy my product. I tell them, in the next 30 minutes, here's what we're going to do. That's number 1. Number 2 is I build my credibility through my story. Because people like connecting with a story. Why are you the best person to build this product? Who are you to tell me that I should automate my webinars? So I tell the story of me traveling and being submersed in these webinars and how it was infringing on my fun. So I tell that story so they can connect with me. I want them to connect with me. That's number 2.
Well, and the thing is, with that story, you shared that story early in the show, is it proves out why you do what you do. You're not just in it to make $1 billion, which would be nice, but it's here was a real problem I was experiencing. If I'm experiencing it, lots of other people are. There are other webinar platforms out there, but they were clunky. The user interface wasn't great. They didn't have chat, whatever. So you figured out a solution for yourself and said, hey, this is something that other people can use too. And if you're on Shark Tank, what better story to lead with than something like that says Melissa's all in because she was first fixing a problem she had, realized that the fix worked, And therefore, how can I help other people regain their freedom? Because that's really all you were looking to do for yourself, right?
Yeah, and actually I was so confident about the problem I wanted to solve because I lived it for so long. I didn't talk to a single person. I didn't do any customer interviews. Like, I didn't talk to anybody. Like, we just designed this. I spec'd the entire thing out, decided on the first set of features, and put it out there, and we got paying customers from day one. Like, I didn't need to talk to anybody because I actually think the best way to validate your idea is the fact that there's other stuff that's out there doing kind of the same thing. So there were other products out there. I didn't need to validate the market anymore. Mm-hmm. So basically, that's also part of my story. And then the third thing that I do, the third step, is I address the competition. I talk about the competition. And the thing is, this is where most sales pitches fail. They're so afraid of talking about the competition because they don't want to shine light on someone else. But the thing is, if you talk about your competition, you actually gain credibility because you show your prospect that you've done your research, that you know what they're talking about. And actually, you can talk about your competition without naming anybody. Like you did exactly what I do in my demo. I tried some other stuff. It was clunky. I didn't really like it. It didn't serve the purpose. So I wanted something else. You basically just talked about the competition without naming anyone. Mm-hmm. And anyone that's tried your competition will already know who you're talking about. So you don't even have to name them. But the thing is, if you don't talk about them up front, for the entire sales pitch, they're thinking, well, what about this other company that I tried? What about the other thing that I'm using? So they're so distracted by the question they want to ask you about the competition that they're not even listening to you for the next 30 minutes. So I always get that out of the way. So like that I think is where most pitches fail because they just don't do it. And then number 4 is I talk about the solution, but I never talk about the features. Like I don't say like, do you want to automate your webinars? I never say that.
Why not?
Because that's a feature. It's like, how many hours do you want? Do you want to save 10 hours a week? Do you want to stop getting up at 3 a.m. to run the next demo? How would your life look like? Right? Like, wouldn't it be great if you could run a webinar and respond to chats in your PJs? Because that's what I do every morning.
So, Melissa, why in your world are so many startup founders and even, successful companies, they get so locked into blah, 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 blahing about their features with a little bit of benefit sprinkled in, where you're doing it the way I believe is the right way and you are proving it's the right way. It's not about what you make, the features, it's what you make happen. The freedom of doing a webinar in your PJs. Why do they get so locked into that?
Because they're not salespeople. And the thing is, I think that's okay. Like, because not everyone's a born salesperson. I just happen to have been in sales my entire career since I was 18. I think sales is a science, right? Like it's the method of telling stories. It's a method of communicating to guide someone to a desired outcome in a not sleazy way, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because a lot of times what you're saying is not what's being heard. Like, think about that for a second, right? Like, this happens in every relationship. It happens not just between you and your prospect and you and your customer. It happens between boy-girlfriends, husband and wives, like father and son. What you're saying is not what's being heard. And the best communicators know how to align the two. And that, I think, is like peak storytelling.
How do you align that, what you're saying, and make sure that it is landing right the first time?
This is the framework that I've tried and tested that I know helps people reason, right? Because they're like, okay, well, so number 1, set the agenda. Okay, now I know what to expect. Number 2, tell your story. Okay, now this person is credible, so I can trust them. So I address the competition. It's like, oh, okay, like, so now my objections are addressed. So it's a thought process. Mm-hmm. If there are 10 ways to get this person to a close, what I'm trying to do is guide them down one single path by not allowing them to think too broadly. So using this framework allows people to think in a more narrow way for 30 minutes. And then they eventually arrive at that conclusion. And when I talk about the solution, as I was talking about features, The way that I actually teach this is I tell people, talk about features as mini stories. I actually do say that. Every feature is a mini story. And you don't have to talk about every feature. Talk about your 5 main features and then tell a story of how one of your customers has benefited from using that feature. And then the last step is, of course, you ask for the close. And it's really as simple as that. It's set your agenda, tell your story, talk about the competition, reveal your solution by telling mini stories of your features, and then ask for the close. Whether the close is sign up now, book a time, send your proposal, whatever that might be. But you'll find that if you use this framework at the end, you'll almost get like no questions because you've already answered all of them.
That is so cool. I've got something similar. I really love how you explain that. And I take people through really kind of the 4 different stories that seem to evolve out of every pitch, out of every communication when you're trying to get someone to buy into your way of thinking, feeling, doing, product, service, or whatever. And it is number 1, it's the 4 T's: trust, build trust. And you're doing that by setting the agenda so that they can kind of settle back and say, okay, I know what Melissa's going to be covering the next 30 minutes. And then you're sharing a connection story about why you did what you did. That's all about building trust so they can relax and really listen. Then there's that truth part of it. The next part is, okay, here's what's changed in the world. Here's how the competition has tried to do this. And here's where maybe they're falling short and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So once you've built the trust, you have that sort of truth chapter in the presentation. Then you've got tension. And tension comes out of that because you probably experience this all the time, is when you're asking someone to buy into something, you're asking them to move out of status quo, what they're currently doing, and take a risk, take a flyer, invest in whatever you're doing or buy my product or whatever. And they have the anti-stories why I couldn't possibly do that. So you've got to address that tension with a better story like you're talking about. I love that idea of turning features into little mini stories. What are the outcomes of these features? And then ultimately the triumph, which is the close. You know, maybe you share one final little user story or case study or whatever to bring your whole story circle, full circle. And so it kind of follows the same thing, but I love the way you explained what you're doing there. Have you ever heard about the ABT, the and, but, therefore narrative framework?
No, what's that?
I'm going to send you when we're done here my little course. It's what I teach. It's everything that I begin with when I'm teaching storytelling. I use 3 frameworks. First, the and, but, therefore, which are 3 words. And, but, therefore, that play off the 3 forces of story, of agreement, contradiction, consequence, which are pattern-seeking, cause and effect, decision-making, limbic buying brain absolutely loves. And then you work into the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. So these are your user stories. When did it happen? Where did it happen? Who did it happen to? What happened? And it was a surprising outcome of that happening because of our product or service that helps then lead you to the close and so forth. And then I teach the 10-step story cycle system, which all of my story training learning began there. It was first created for branding, but now it's really used for long-form communication and story presentation. But I bring up the ABTs for you because I think you, with your analytical mind, but your emotional appeal, would find it really interesting. And what I'm going to do after the show, Melissa, is I'm going to send you a little link with a password to my little 18-minute course on the ABTs of selling, and would love to get your thoughts on it.
Awesome. I would love to see it.
But it's something you can use to shape all of your storytelling. And is a statement of agreement, but is a statement of contradiction. Here's the problem we're solving for. And with that agreement is about the shared vision, but here's why we don't have it. And the therefore is kind of your close. Therefore, here's what we need to do next to get there, to get them to buy.
But isn't this beautiful, right? We're talking about these frameworks of how to tell stories, and anyone can learn it.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned, why are other founders so stuck on talking about the features? Well, I don't think enough founders spend time understanding the importance of this. Right? They're so focused on if I build it, they will come, or this is a good product, so let's just get it out there. But there's such a disconnect between you building the product and someone understanding how it will impact their life. No one cares about your product. They only care what it's going to do for them. We are selfish people. right? Like, tell me how it's going to improve my life if I pay for this. Like, you want me to pay for this, right? So I do think a lot more founders should listen to podcasts like this and try out frameworks like this. And it doesn't have to be exact, right? I think everyone starts from a certain place and then they can make it their own, right? Like, yeah. I mean, a long time ago, my first job, I sold real estate. And I was apprenticing for this like top agent for 9 months. And I didn't sell a single thing on my own. And then after I quit that job and I came out on my own, that year, I sold 36 properties on my own. I think I was like 23 or 24. And when I was thinking back, I'm like, why couldn't I sell anything when I was shadowing this, like one of the top brokers in my city? And I realized it was because he was telling me exactly what to say when all the time. So I wasn't talking to people as me. I was talking to people as him. And he was telling me exactly how to handle an objection. So I was like saying it, but it wasn't authentic. And people knew, and of course I was so young as well, but like what I learned from that is there isn't one way to sell, right? How you come up with your own sales personality, how you present, you have to make your own. But if you're not good at it from the start, or if you don't have a lot of experience, just start with a framework and then don't be afraid to just change it and make it your own, because you will find your own tribe.
Well, and that's the beauty of the ABT. It does a couple things that we have talked about earlier today that I'm a huge proponent of. It puts your audience at the center of the story, because when you're first creating that and statement of agreement, you begin with your audience. Hi, Melissa, you want this, and it's important to you because of this. So that means you've done your homework, you understand what they want, and appreciate why that's important to them. But you don't have it because of this. Here's what I'm going to help you overcome. So in your case, Melissa, you're traveling the world and you're trying to help all these people through these demos, and that's what makes you successful. But it is totally sucking your freedom, because you're having to get up at the middle of the night, no matter where you are in the world, to be able to deliver this very repetitive information. Therefore, you can now get the sleep and enjoy the freedom you like, and even present in your pajamas with eWebinar, because we have taken that repetition out of, so there it is. But what we've done is what? And look I got you smiling right there. I've told the story. I love that,
because you're doing my sales pitch for me.
Well, I love the story because it's being told from your perspective. In this case, I'm selling you on the ABT. It's told from your perspective. What it is that you wanted that created eWebinar in the first place, but why didn't you have it? Because there was no other real efficient platform out there for you to get it. Therefore, you have, filled in those holes and gaps by doing what you're doing with eWebinar. And that's what I love so much about the ABT, because it placed you, your audience, at the center of the story, and it didn't talk about what you make. It does mention eWebinar, but it doesn't go into all features and functions. It talks about what you make happen, getting that freedom back. Mm-hmm. So it's a really cool framework, people. The thing about it is you'll find when you play with it, oh, Park, I've got this. It's just 3 words, no big deal. And then you find you got to practice it. You got to work it over and over again every day. And the more you do it, then it becomes second nature to you.
Yeah.
But it takes about 6 weeks for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to learn more about it.
Yeah, well, I'll shoot you a link to that. Listen, this is great. It is late in Vietnam. I'm going to let you go get some shut-eye. In the meantime, where can people learn more about eWebinar, you and your work, and where should we send them?
Yeah, if you want to connect with me, best place is LinkedIn. My last name is spelled Kwan, Kwan, so it's Melissa Kwan. And if you're curious about eWebinar and how it can impact your life and get your freedom back, check out eWebinar.com. It's spelled exactly as it sounds, eWebinar.com.
Awesome. Hey, you had mentioned earlier in the show about being a burner, going to Burning Man.
Yes.
Have you ever seen the film, Oh, the Places You'll Go at Burning Man?
I haven't, but it sounds like I should.
You should. Our son, Parker Howell, was in Burning Man. He was a filmmaker out of Chapman University. He and his buddy just had graduated, and the three of them went to Burning Man in 2011, and they shot the whole Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, recited by all the different characters at Burning Man.
Oh, wow.
And then they posted it January 2012, and this is before there was much posted video-wise about Burning Man. A few little odds and ends. Well, that film has blown up. I think it's seen 4 million hits since then, and of course, it really kind of triggered a lot of people shooting films at Burning Man and pushing them out to the world. But I tell you all that, Melissa, because just 2 weeks ago, I had Darius Holbert on, and Darius was the composer of the most amazing, mesmerizing soundtrack, at least to me, to Oh, the Places You'll Go at Burning Man. And they just did an open source call, say, hey, we have zero money, but we're looking for a composer to score this out. And then, and he came in and did it for free, and it is marvelous. So just go to YouTube, search Oh, the Places You'll Go at Burning Man. It's a film I'm very proud of because our son and the work that he and Will Walsh and Teddy Saunders did on it is really incredible. And I figure as a burner, you might appreciate it.
I will definitely look that up. Thank you so much for letting me know.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much.
And I'd like to thank all of you for listening to this amazing edition of the Business of Story with Melissa Kwan. Check out eWebinar. I know I'm going to. The one thing I didn't get to with Melissa, but we'll have to do it on a separate show, is I wanted her to coach me on how I could use that product for Business of Story. But I think I've got some ideas. Anyways, share this episode. Check out ewebinar.com if that's going to work for you. If I can be of service to you, come on over to businessofstory.com. And if you want to check out our 3 online courses on the ABT, that's the ABTs of Selling, the ABTs of Branding, and my newest course, the ABTs of Agile Communications, just go to businessofstory.com/ABT. Everything you need to know about this messaging marvel, you can learn through those courses. And I guarantee it will revolutionize how you communicate and how you can get your messages to land right the first time, every time. All right, that's it for me today. Join us next Monday when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Melissa. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.